We're halfway through the fantasy football regular season, and we already have 8 season-altering major injuries to breakout players, to key players, highly drafted players, and some players that are tanking fantasy football teams and real-life teams. First is Breece Hall. Devastating for Breece Hall owners as he was the RB9 points per game before his injury, his torn ACL in Week 7. Even ripped off a huge, impressive touchdown run in Week 7. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the Jets losing his explosive plays. Michael Carter is a quality back, and they traded for James Robinson from the Jaguars. More on that in a second. Losing Breece Hall is going to hurt the Jets' explosive plays. You might have thought Michael Carter without Breece Hall. Now, awesome pick. Not so fast. They did trades for James Robinson, which maybe actually the Breece Hall injury has more impact on James Robinson and Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne may be the league winner here from the Jaguars. He has back-to-back games of 100 total yards, and he just got up to 80% snaps with the Jaguars last week. It's funny that a Breece Hall injury might turn Travis Etienne into the league winner, but that might be the case. Week 7, we also saw Mike Williams, Chargers wide receiver, go down with a high ankle sprain. His return is TBD, but high ankle sprain, typically not a very good, definitely not a quick return to play for Mike Williams. The lack of weapons for the Chargers has been a real issue this year, and Mike Williams being maybe their most potent wide receiver, definitely their most potent outside wide receiver, is going to leave a gaping hole for the Chargers. But what this has done, this has turned Austin Eckler into an absolute smash. Austin Eckler was already the RB1 through 7 weeks in all of fantasy. His pass game role is monstrous, and Mike Williams only missed 1 game last year. Austin Eckler happened to miss that game as well. The Chargers actually lost to the Houston Texans in that game. Yikes. But it was a 30-plus point fantasy game for Justin Jackson. Not Austin Eckler, but Justin Jackson had a 30-plus point fantasy game against the Houston Texans without Mike Williams. More checkdowns, more work funneling through the Chargers' best player, Austin Eckler, as they try to fight for the playoffs with a pretty disappointing start. 2 weeks ago, we saw Marquise Brown go down with a foot injury, a fracture in his foot. Looks like he doesn't need surgery, but according to Cliff Kingsbury, he's going to be out about a month, at least a month. So we don't know exactly when Hollywood is going to return to play, but this did spur the Cardinals in trading for disgruntled Panthers wide receiver Robbie Anderson. Maybe minimal impact for Robbie Anderson, but let's be real, it can't be worse than playing for the Panthers as the Panthers tear it down and start to rebuild. So maybe a little bit more spike week, no pun intended, potential for Robbie Anderson. What really is the benefit here is DeAndre Hopkins. After his 6-game suspension, Hopkins returned on a short week with just a couple days of practice to slot right into his high-volume role in the Cardinals' passing attack. He had 14 targets on just 29 Kyler Murray pass attempts in his first game back, and Hopkins looks like the clear winner here without Hollywood. Maybe would have been the winner regardless, but definitely without him. Hopkins looks like a huge fantasy asset moving forward. On the Hollywood front, if he returns in a month or so and you can sneak him in to the fantasy playoffs, certainly to the best ball playoffs, the Cardinals offense could really start to get humming. Got to put a lot of faith in Cliff Kingsbury for that to happen. But with Hopkins back and Hollywood and Robbie Anderson and Rondale Moore and maybe a healthy James Conner, there's a lot of talent. Zach Ertz, there's a lot of talent on the Cardinals offense that could create some explosive plays for Hollywood, maybe at low ownership in the best ball playoffs. Rashaad Penny is out for the season with a fractured fibula. If you've been watching for just the last couple of weeks, you know it's Ken Walker season. Rookie second-round pick Ken Walker, who maybe seemed like a puzzling pick when the Seahawks, what we thought was a bad team at the time, and had just re-signed Rashaad Penny to a longer-term contract, drafted Ken Walker in the second round. That certainly looks like a pretty strong move right about now. In 2 games since Rashaad Penny had that fracture in his leg, Ken Walker has had 23 total touches in both games. He's totaled 278 yards and 3 touchdowns, ripping off long touchdown runs, big plays in both of those games. Moving forward, Ken Walker is a top 10 running back in fantasy on a really good Seahawks offense, and you were able to get him past pick 100 in just about all formats, looking like a smash for Ken Walker. Unfortunately, however, for the Seahawks, superstar wide receiver DK Metcalf went down with what looked like a very serious injury, but Pete Carroll's calling a patellar tendon issue. No surgery looks like it's going to be required, but frankly, it looked really bad. I'd be surprised if DK was back anytime soon. We'll wait and see on that, but this is going to definitely hurt the Seahawks offense. One of the best big play superstar wide receivers in the NFL Geno Smith has been playing great, but this is going to hurt the Seahawks. They did still manage to score 37 points on the Chargers this week, even though DK only played 28% of the snaps, had 2 targets. So maybe the offense keeps humming along. They're playing really well with Geno Smith. Marquise Goodwin is the player who stepped in to the full-time role without Metcalf in that game, and he did score 2 touchdowns. If you're in season-long leagues, maybe Marquise Goodwin's worth a little flyer for a flex play as a wide receiver. But the real story here is Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett accumulated 8 targets on just 27 Geno Smith pass attempts in those basically 3 quarters without DK Metcalf. Lockett was pushed way down draft boards in the offseason, and you got to feel pretty good about having Tyler Lockett now without DK Metcalf. It's been a few weeks, but Trey Lance's injury was a devastating blow to his drafters. He was the QB8 by ADP, a popular breakout pick, and maybe even high floor, high upside pick at the quarterback position in the high-powered San Francisco offense. It's also killer because he got hurt super early in the year. You can't accumulate his points, use his draft capital for very long, and he didn't have a big game before then. So looking like a huge killer if you drafted Trey Lance, but it's also having some big downstream effects to the 49ers offense, combined with the fact that their defense is extremely banged up right now. They just gave up 417 passing yards to Patrick Mahomes. Granted, Patrick Mahomes, but still 417 yards to the Chiefs offense. Gave up 28 points to the Falcons in a loss. Back-to-back losses now for the 49ers. This spurred a trade for Christian McCaffrey. They've moved to a slightly more pass-heavy approach with Jimmy Garoppolo. Say whatever you want about Jimmy. He's going to be able to distribute the ball in a little bit more pass-heavy approach than Trey Lance was to all of these weapons. You now have an offense with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. It's completely loaded, and if Jimmy can play even reasonably well, this offense should be absolutely humming along if the defense continues to not be able to stop anybody. I think Christian McCaffrey is maybe one of the more underrated assets in fantasy right now. The San Francisco offense is going to create an efficient running attack, and if they continue to use him, which we should expect them to with Kyle Shanahan, use him in the passing game, Christian McCaffrey should have a monster second half of the season, and the 49ers offense should score a ton of points. So you should be fairly excited about all these guys, even if the volume doesn't look awesome for the Deebos, Kittles, and Ayuks of the world. In a game where he took over the backfield, finally, what drafters were hoping for, with Melvin Gordon having fumbling issues and being ineffective, Javonte Williams had taken over the backfield and tore his ACL a few weeks ago. The Broncos have been an absolute disaster, and Javonte was one of the only bright spots. Javonte, maybe Cortland Sutton, maybe if you squint, a little bit of Jerry Jeudy. But the Broncos have been an absolute disaster, and Javonte was coming into his own. Unfortunate for those who drafted Javonte, and you would think maybe you're a 0 RB drafter, maybe you were into Melvin Gordon in draft season in a timeshare. You would think this would mean Melvin Gordon in the Broncos offense with Russell Wilson would be an absolute smash, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Melvin Gordon's fumbling and ineffectiveness has led to him being still in a committee. Doesn't matter if it's Javonte or Mike Boone or now Latavius Murray. Mike Boone did get injured. I believe he has a high ankle sprain as well. He's on IR now, but Melvin still projects to be in a basically 50-50 split with Latavius Murray. Yes, Latavius Murray. And you can't feel particularly good about Melvin Gordon moving forward. In week 4, it looked like J.K. Dobbins was going to be one of the steals of the entire draft season. He returned from injury, got to 50% of snaps for the Ravens, scored 2 touchdowns, looked like the J.K. Dobbins we know and love. Unfortunately, they started to scale him back thereafter, and even yet, he still got hurt in 2 weeks ago game with the Giants. Tweaked his knee, and J.K. Dobbins is now on IR. Never a good sign when someone off a very serious knee injury goes back on IR with that knee. And we saw Gus Edwards come back from his own knee injury this past week from IR and not take over the backfield, but 16 carries, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 36% of snaps. So if the touchdowns don't come for Gus, that's a very real concern. But you're going to see big games from Gus Edwards as the sort of lead back in probably a 3-headed committee. But the Ravens are going to score points and they're going to run the ball. So Gus Edwards looks pretty good moving forward. So that wraps us up. That's the 8 players impacting fantasy, season-altering injuries that we've seen thus far. Hopefully we don't get too many more to come. Probably inevitable, but those are the guys that are totally changing the fantasy landscape. We have league winners in there. We have guys that are totally disappointing, like the Melvin Gordons of the world, and some devastated drafters with some of the injuries that have occurred. If you want to see how your best ball teams are doing, your underdog fantasy teams, your DraftKings best ball teams, or your drafters fantasy teams, sign up for Spike Week Premium, spikeweek.com/go premium. The link is in the description. And you can get access to anything and everything you want to see about your best ball teams. Want to see how many Travis Etienne teams you have, Tyler Lockett teams, Melvin Gordon, so you can tilt your Melvin Gordon teams, Gus Edwards, anything you want to see, you can find it in the Draft IQ tool on spikeweek.com. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We will see you guys next week.